The vast, shimmering expanse of the Alaskan coastline, a place of unparalleled beauty and formidable power, often conjures images of majestic glaciers, abundant wildlife, and the promise of adventure. For many, it's the ultimate escape, a chance to shed the mundane and embrace the extraordinary. But for John and Sarah Peterson, a young couple embarking on their honeymoon in the summer of 1990 aboard the luxurious cruise liner the Northern Star, this idyllic journey took an abrupt and terrifying turn into the unfathomable. Imagine the scene. The crisp, salt-laced air, the sun glinting off the icy waters, the gentle hum of the ship, a comforting soundtrack to nascent marital bliss. They were newlyweds, their future stretching before them as boundless and brilliant as the Alaskan summer sky. Then, in the space of a single night, they vanished. Not a note, not a struggle, not a single witness to their departure from this world. Just an empty stateroom, a chilling silence, and a mystery that would echo through the decades, a phantom presence on the vast, indifferent ocean. This isn't just a story of a missing couple. It's a deep dive into the nature of enigmas, the human need for answers, and the way certain events lodge themselves in our collective consciousness, defying logic and demanding explanation. The initial search was, as one might expect, exhaustive. Every corner of the ship scoured, every passenger questioned, every theory, no matter how outlandish, considered. Yet John and Sarah Peterson remained gone, swallowed by the immensity of Alaska's wilderness, or perhaps by something far more inexplicable. The hope that flickered in the hearts of their families, initially a roaring flame, gradually dwindled to embers, leaving behind a landscape of grief and unanswered questions. The sheer impossibility of their vanishing act from a sealed environment, a room on a moving vessel, locked from the inside, became the focal point of the enduring puzzle. How does one simply cease to be, leaving behind only the ghost of their presence? This documentary aims to revisit that chilling summer, not just to recount the facts of the disappearance, but to explore the psychological impact of such an event, the desperate attempts to make sense of the nonsensical, and the peculiar resilience of mystery itself. We will delve into the procedures of maritime investigation, the unique challenges presented by an open ocean disappearance, and the often frustrating limitations of even the most thorough inquiries. Our journey will be guided by those who were there, the seasoned investigators who grappled with the bewildering evidence, the fellow passengers who recall the unsettling atmosphere that descended upon the ship, and the maritime experts who can illuminate the technicalities and possibilities of life at sea. The narrative will build, layer by layer, examining the knowns and the unknowns, the logical deductions and the lingering impossibilities, all leading to a startling discovery made decades later within the very stateroom that became the epicenter of this enduring enigma. This revelation, unearthed from within an undisturbed space, doesn't offer easy answers, but rather deepens the mystery, presenting a silent, stark testament to a puzzle as vast and as inscrutable as the Alaskan wilderness that served as its silent, imposing backdrop. The initial search for John and Sarah Peterson aboard the Northern Star was a meticulously orchestrated yet ultimately futile exercise in containment and discovery. From the moment their absence was noted, a missed breakfast reservation, an unanswered stateroom knock, a cascade of protocols was initiated. Ship security, a trained but limited force accustomed to minor infractions rather than complete disappearances, began a systematic sweep of every public and private space. This involved not just visual inspection, but also the methodical checking of emergency equipment lockers, lifeboats, and even the ship's ventilation systems, however improbable such avenues might seem. Simultaneously, the ship's captain, a seasoned mariner with decades of experience navigating treacherous waters, was obligated to notify maritime authorities and the Coast Guard. This notification triggered a broader, though still geographically confined, search. Coast Guard vessels, equipped with sonar and trained rescue divers, were dispatched to the ship's last known position and along its charted course. Aerial patrols, utilizing specialized aircraft with thermal imaging capabilities, scanned the frigid waters for any sign of disturbance or debris. The sheer scale of the Alaskan maritime environment, however, presents a formidable challenge. The ocean's depths are immense. Currents are powerful and unpredictable, and the coastline is a labyrinth of fjords and inlets. Within hours, the search area expanded exponentially, transforming a focused inquiry into a needle-in-a-haystack operation. Furthermore, the passage of time itself became an adversary. Every hour that elapsed reduced the likelihood of a successful rescue and increased the possibility of irreparable loss of evidence. The psychological toll on the remaining passengers and crew was palpable. A cloud of unease settled over the Northern Star, transforming the vibrant atmosphere of a honeymoon cruise into one of hushed whispers and anxious glances. Fellow passengers, initially united by the shared experience of witnessing Alaska's grandeur, were now bound by a collective sense of dread and bewilderment. They recalled small, seemingly insignificant details: an unusual quietness from the Petersons' stateroom, a fleeting glimpse of one of them on deck at an odd hour, or perhaps nothing at all, which in itself became a source of gnawing suspicion. The investigation also had to contend with the possibility of a voluntary disappearance, a deliberate act to escape their lives. While seemingly improbable for a honeymooning couple, investigators could not entirely discount it. This meant discreet inquiries into their backgrounds, their relationships, and any potential stresses that might have prompted such a drastic measure. However, initial checks revealed no obvious red flags, no history of mental health crises or financial ruin that might explain a sudden flight. The complexity of a cruise ship environment, a contained ecosystem of thousands of individuals and countless hidden spaces, paradoxically made a vanishing act both difficult to achieve and terrifyingly easy to perpetrate, depending on the method. The sheer volume of potential hiding places, coupled with the constant movement of the vessel, could, in theory, allow for a brief period of concealment. Yet the idea of remaining hidden for an extended period on a ship where everyone was under scrutiny strained credulity. The initial days of the search were characterized by a desperate, almost frantic energy, fueled by the raw hope of a miraculous survival. As the days turned into weeks, and no trace of John or Sarah Peterson emerged, that hope began to transmute into a grim acceptance of the worst, leaving behind a void filled only by the persistent, unanswered question: where did they go? The enduring puzzle of the Petersons' disappearance quickly transitioned from a maritime incident into a deeply personal tragedy for their families, who were left to navigate a landscape of profound uncertainty and emotional turmoil. The lack of definitive answers proved to be an agonizing burden, far more corrosive than the certainty of loss. Imagine the relatives, clinging to the faintest threads of hope, replaying every conversation, every shared memory, searching for clues that were never there. They were subjected to the gruff, often impersonal questioning of investigators, their grief laid bare under a clinical, analytical gaze. Each unanswered question from the authorities: did they seem happy? Were there any arguments? Did they mention any specific fears? Served only to reopen wounds, forcing them to dissect their loved ones' final days in excruciating detail. The media, too, played a significant role, often amplifying the speculation and sensationalizing the mystery. Headlines screamed about improbable scenarios, fueling public fascination while simultaneously intensifying the family's anguish. For them, the Alaskan wilderness wasn't a picturesque backdrop. It was a vast, unforgiving abyss that had swallowed their cherished John and Sarah. The absence of a body or any physical evidence meant that closure was an elusive, perhaps unattainable concept. This void allowed for the insidious growth of what-ifs, the haunting specters of alternative explanations that gnawed at their peace. Could they have fallen overboard accidentally? Was there foul play involved? Or in the most chilling of possibilities, did they somehow orchestrate their own vanishing? The inability to definitively answer these questions meant that their mourning process was perpetually stalled, trapped in a cycle of speculation and dread. This psychological strain is a critical, often overlooked consequence of such unexplained events. The human mind craves narrative, a coherent story to make sense of the world. When faced with an event that defies logical sequencing and resolution, it can lead to significant psychological distress, including anxiety, depression, and even post-traumatic stress symptoms, particularly for those directly affected. Now consider how this applies when you face a loved one's unexplained absence, the constant gnawing doubt, the impossibility of moving forward, the feeling of being adrift in a sea of unanswered questions. The Petersons' families were forced to live with this pervasive sense of incompleteness, their lives forever marked by the summer of 1990 and the chilling enigma that unfolded on the Alaskan seas. The very nature of a cruise ship, that floating city navigating international waters, introduces a unique set of investigative complexities that diverge significantly from land-based disappearances. Unlike a crime scene fixed in one location, the Northern Star was a constantly moving platform, altering its geographical coordinates and its legal jurisdiction with every nautical mile traversed. This fluidity meant that evidence, if any existed, was not only susceptible to the elements, but also to the changing legal frameworks governing the investigation. Authorities in the initial port of call might have jurisdiction, but so too could the nation whose waters the ship entered next, or even the country under whose flag the vessel was registered. This jurisdictional labyrinth could, and often did, lead to delays, conflicting protocols, and a diffusion of investigative resources. Consider the painstaking process of securing a stateroom on land. It's a straightforward procedure involving cordoning off an area. On a ship, however, the entire vessel is a transient environment. Every stateroom, every corridor, every deck is part of a dynamic ecosystem where thousands of individuals, each with their own movements and interactions, contribute to a constantly shifting tableau. The initial sweep, while thorough, was inherently time-bound. Once the ship docked and passengers disembarked, the window for preserving the integrity of potential evidence within the ship itself began to close. Furthermore, the ship's operational needs dictated a swift return to service, often necessitating the cleaning and reassigning of staterooms, potentially obliterating crucial forensic traces before they could be meticulously documented. The unique challenges extended to the maritime environment itself. The immense pressure at depth, the corrosive effects of salt water, and the sheer volume of ocean floor made underwater searches, even in relatively shallow coastal waters, exceptionally difficult and costly. Any object dropped or cast overboard would be subject to powerful currents, rapidly displacing it from its point of origin, rendering sonar sweeps and diver searches increasingly less effective as time progressed. Moreover, the psychological impact on the crew, who were obliged to continue their duties while harboring the unsettling knowledge of the Petersons' unexplained absence, cannot be understated. They were witnesses to the unfolding drama, privy to the ship's internal movements and passenger interactions, yet bound by professional discretion and the inherent limitations of their roles. Their accounts, while valuable, were filtered through the lens of their onboard responsibilities and the ingrained culture of maritime discretion, adding another layer of interpretative challenge for investigators. Now, consider how this applies when the very environment of the investigation is a moving, self-contained world. The ship's manifest, a roster of every soul aboard, becomes both a tool and a torment, a list of potential witnesses and suspects, each with a story that might or might not shed light on the enigma. The sheer number of individuals, coupled with the transient nature of their presence, meant that tracking down every passenger for follow-up interviews after disembarkation was a logistical nightmare, a task that often proved insurmountable. The initial investigation, therefore, was a race against time and geography, a battle waged against the vastness of the ocean and the inherent complexities of a maritime environment. The absence of immediate, conclusive evidence meant that the case was inherently destined to become a cold file, a testament to the limitations of even the most dedicated investigative efforts when confronted with the profound mysteries of the sea and human behavior. The initial investigation, while thorough for its time, was fundamentally constrained by the technological capabilities and forensic understanding prevalent in 1990. Modern crime scene analysis, particularly in cases involving potential environmental factors or highly unusual circumstances, benefits from advancements that were then either nascent or entirely unavailable. Consider the sophistication of DNA profiling. In 1990, DNA analysis was still a relatively new and complex procedure, often requiring larger samples and taking significantly longer to yield results compared to today's rapid, highly sensitive techniques. This meant that any trace biological evidence left in the Petersons' stateroom or potentially on items recovered from the sea might have been overlooked or deemed insufficient for analysis under the standards of the era. Furthermore, the methods for detecting and preserving microscopic evidence, such as specialized fibers, latent fingerprints treated with advanced cyanoacrylate fuming, or even minute residues from unusual substances, have evolved dramatically. Investigators in 1990 relied more heavily on visual inspection and established chemical tests, which might not have been sensitive enough to identify trace anomalies that could have provided crucial clues. The concept of digital forensics, for instance, was virtually non-existent. There were no personal computers in staterooms, no readily accessible digital logs of passenger movements or communications that could be easily extracted and analyzed. Information gathering was almost entirely reliant on paper records, witness interviews, and physical searches, a far more labor-intensive and less comprehensive approach. The analysis of shipboard systems themselves was also more rudimentary. While logs existed for navigation and engine performance, the intricate network of electronic sensors and data recorders that populate modern vessels, capable of logging minute details of environmental conditions and internal operations, was not yet a reality. Consequently, any potential environmental anomalies or subtle system malfunctions that might have played a role in the disappearance would have been far more difficult, if not impossible, to detect and correlate with the events. The absence of advanced forensic tools meant that the investigators were, in essence, working with a limited palette of analytical techniques, significantly handicapping their ability to uncover subtle truths hidden within the physical evidence or the ship's operational data. This technological disparity is a crucial lens through which to re-examine the initial findings, or rather the lack thereof, acknowledging that what might seem like oversights today were often the unavoidable limitations of the investigative toolkit available at the time. The inability to definitively rule out certain scenarios due to these limitations inevitably contributed to the enduring ambiguity of the case, allowing speculative theories to flourish in the absence of concrete, scientifically verifiable data. The psychological impact of such technological limitations on the investigators themselves is also worth noting. The frustration of knowing that advanced techniques might exist but are simply not accessible would have been immense. Building on the limitations of 1990s technology, the very definition of a sealed room in the context of a cruise ship presents unique challenges that extend beyond simple lock mechanisms. A stateroom on the Northern Star, while a private space, was still intrinsically connected to the ship's larger systems. Ventilation shafts, plumbing, and electrical conduits all represent potential, albeit often improbable, ingress or egress points that might not have been immediately obvious during a standard search. The sheer complexity of a ship's internal architecture, with its labyrinthine network of service tunnels and access panels, could easily conceal pathways that a cursory inspection would miss. Consider the possibility of access through shared ventilation systems. While large enough for a person to pass through is unlikely, smaller components might have been manipulated or removed. Furthermore, the concept of sealed from the inside needs a more nuanced examination in this specific context. Was it locked with a traditional deadbolt, a key card system, or perhaps a combination of both? The integrity of the locking mechanism itself becomes a critical point of inquiry. Could a mechanism be tampered with from the outside in a way that leaves minimal observable trace, yet still allows for the room to appear locked from within? The sophistication of modern lockpicking tools, or even improvised methods available in 1990, might have been sufficient to bypass certain types of locks, with the perpetrator then re-securing it from the inside via an accomplice or a pre-arranged method before exiting through another means. The psychological aspect of the sealed room also plays a significant role in how the mystery is perceived. It creates an immediate sense of impossibility, a violation of physical laws that captivates the imagination and fuels speculation. However, in a maritime environment, the boundaries of a room are not as absolute as they are in a land-based structure. The constant motion of the ship, the vibrations, and the stresses on the hull could potentially compromise structural integrity in subtle ways, perhaps allowing for temporary access or egress through unconventional means that would not be possible in a stationary building. The investigative team would have had to consider not just the immediate stateroom, but its relationship to the ship's overall structure and the potential for interaction with adjacent spaces or external elements. Now consider how this applies when the very notion of containment is challenged by the dynamic nature of the environment. The investigation would have needed to meticulously map the stateroom's position relative to the ship's exterior, its proximity to decks, lifeboats, and any external access points, however remote. The possibility of a hidden compartment within the stateroom itself, designed for purposes unknown or perhaps even constructed by the occupants, would also have been a consideration, however unlikely. The phrase "sealed from the inside" therefore becomes less a definitive statement of fact and more a starting point for a deeper interrogation of the physical realities of the ship and the stateroom's specific construction and access points. The lack of any discernible signs of struggle or forced entry, which is often a key indicator in disappearances, paradoxically amplifies the enigma of the Petersons' vanishing. In typical scenarios of abduction or foul play, investigators look for overturned furniture, broken objects, or physical evidence of a confrontation. The absence of such indicators in their stateroom suggests that any event leading to their disappearance was either remarkably swift and efficient, or it occurred in a manner that left no physical trace. This points towards possibilities that diverge significantly from conventional criminal investigation paradigms. Consider the implications for eyewitness accounts. If there was no struggle, it implies that either the perpetrators were exceptionally skilled, or the Petersons were incapacitated or willingly departed without resistance. The latter, given it was their honeymoon, strains credulity unless there were undisclosed factors at play, such as extreme duress or a pre-existing plan. The meticulous nature of the Petersons' apparent departure, leaving their belongings seemingly undisturbed, further complicates the narrative. This suggests a deliberate, planned exit rather than a spontaneous event, or perhaps an exit so swift that there was no opportunity to gather personal effects. The investigation would have had to grapple with the psychological profile of individuals capable of orchestrating such an event, whether voluntary or coerced. Now think about how this applies when the scene itself offers no clues to the how or why of a conflict. Was the absence of struggle a deliberate attempt by the perpetrators to mislead investigators, or was it a reflection of the Petersons' own actions or incapacitation? The clean state of the stateroom might indicate a level of control and precision that is unsettlingly meticulous. This could point to individuals with specific skills or knowledge, perhaps relating to maritime operations, stealth, or even psychological manipulation. The absence of overt violence forces investigators to consider more subtle and complex scenarios. Were they lured out of the room under false pretenses? Was there a clandestine meeting arranged on the ship that went terribly wrong? The sheer lack of disturbance transforms the stateroom from a potential crime scene into a sterile stage, where the actors have simply exited, leaving the set perfectly arranged, but with the plot entirely unknown. This absence of the expected, the chaos of a struggle, becomes, in itself, a profound clue, directing the inquiry towards the less conventional and the more psychologically complex motivations and methods. It compels a consideration of scenarios where physical force was not the primary element, or where its application was so refined as to leave no trace. The discovery, decades later, of the Petersons' stateroom remaining sealed from the inside, a time capsule of their final moments, introduces a startling new dimension to the investigation, shifting the focus from a search for missing persons to a forensic examination of a preserved enigma. This revelation implies that the stateroom itself, for whatever reason, was never fully processed or disturbed in the initial frantic aftermath, or perhaps it was deliberately preserved. Imagine the scene. The door, still locked from within, the interior untouched by the subsequent disembarkation and routine cleaning protocols that would typically follow such an event. This suggests that the stateroom was somehow isolated, perhaps by a specific directive or an oversight that in hindsight proved instrumental. The implications for forensic science are profound. Advances in trace evidence analysis, environmental DNA sampling, and even subtle structural integrity assessments could now be applied to a setting that has remained largely static for over 30 years. Consider the potential for recovering microscopic fibers, skin cells, or even airborne particles that might have settled in undisturbed layers, providing a snapshot of the stateroom's environment at the time of the disappearance. The very fact that it was found sealed implies that whatever happened, the occupants did not exit through the main door in a conventional manner, or if they did, the door was meticulously resecured. Now, think about how this applies when a space is discovered in a state of near-pristine preservation, decades after the event. It's akin to uncovering a perfectly preserved archaeological site, offering a unique opportunity to re-examine the past with the benefit of contemporary scientific understanding. This preserved stateroom is not just a room, it's a silent witness, holding within its walls the potential to answer questions that have plagued investigators and families for years. The discovery shifts the narrative from one of active searching and speculation to one of meticulous, almost archaeological investigation. The focus would now be on the subtle anomalies, the minute details that might have been overlooked or deemed insignificant in 1990, but could prove critical today. The challenge lies in interpreting these findings within the context of the original event, ensuring that modern scientific techniques are applied appropriately to a historical scene, avoiding contamination or misinterpretation. The existence of this undisturbed space fundamentally alters the investigative landscape, transforming an open-ended mystery into a contained, albeit deeply complex, forensic puzzle. The enduring fascination with the Peterson case, and indeed with many unexplained disappearances, taps into a deep-seated human need to resolve paradoxes and impose order on chaos. The sealed room scenario, in particular, resonates with a primal sense of impossibility, a violation of the logical progression of cause and effect that we rely on to understand the world. This psychological pull is amplified when the disappearance occurs in a setting as vast and indifferent as the Alaskan wilderness, a place that symbolizes both untamed beauty and formidable, inscrutable power. Consider how narratives of the unexplained, from Bermuda Triangle mysteries to alien abductions, often thrive in environments where conventional explanations seem insufficient. The Petersons' Vanishing Act, locked within a seemingly impenetrable space on a moving vessel, presents a compelling, almost theatrical paradox that defies easy categorization. It's a scenario that challenges our understanding of physical boundaries and human agency. Now think about how this applies when the circumstances themselves seem to bend the rules of reality. The media's role in perpetuating such mysteries is also significant. By focusing on the most baffling aspects and amplifying speculative theories, they often create a narrative that overshadows the more mundane, yet equally important, investigative details. This can lead to a public perception that is more focused on the sensational than on the systematic pursuit of truth. Furthermore, the very concept of closure in cases like this is complex. For the families, closure might mean finding definitive answers, however tragic. For the public, it might mean a satisfying resolution to a compelling narrative. When answers remain elusive, the mystery itself can become the enduring artifact, a testament to the limits of our knowledge and the persistent allure of the unknown. The Petersons' story, therefore, transcends the specifics of their individual lives. It becomes a broader commentary on our relationship with mystery, our desire for certainty, and the ways in which certain enigmas continue to capture our imagination, compelling us to seek meaning in the face of the inexplicable. The enduring power of their story lies not just in the unanswered questions, but in the questions it forces us to ask about ourselves and our perception of reality. The discovery of the Petersons' stateroom, sealed from the inside and undisturbed for decades, represents a profound shift in the investigative approach, moving from a broad search to a highly focused forensic examination of a preserved environment. This presents a unique opportunity to apply advanced scientific methodologies that were either unavailable or in their infancy in 1990. Consider the potential of environmental DNA, eDNA analysis. Techniques now allow for the detection of microscopic traces of DNA shed by individuals from skin cells, hair follicles, or even breath particles that have settled on surfaces over time. In a stateroom that has remained sealed, these layers of biological residue could provide an unprecedentedly detailed picture of who occupied the space and their activities. Furthermore, advancements in material science and forensic chemistry can identify minute residues of substances, such as specific cleaning agents, polymers from clothing, or even trace elements from the ship's environment that might have been present in 1990, but were undetectable with the analytical tools of the era. The ability to analyze the air within the sealed stateroom for specific volatile organic compounds, VOCs, or particulate matter could also offer clues about the conditions or events that transpired. Now, think about how this applies when you have a pristine, contained environment to analyze with cutting-edge tools. The preservation of the stateroom means that the initial investigative parameters can be revisited with a fresh perspective, free from the contamination or degradation that typically affects evidence over time. This allows for the re-evaluation of seemingly insignificant details that might have been overlooked or dismissed in the initial high-pressure investigation. For instance, microscopic scratches on a doorframe, subtle discolorations on a carpet, or even the precise positioning of personal effects could hold critical information when examined with modern magnification and analytical techniques. The challenge lies in ensuring that the subsequent examination itself does not introduce contamination, requiring meticulous protocols for entry and evidence collection. The existence of this preserved space transforms the case from an open-ended mystery of a missing couple into a highly specific forensic investigation, where the stateroom itself becomes the primary and perhaps only source of concrete evidence. It's a chance to rewrite the narrative, not by finding new witnesses or discovering new information about the Petersons' lives, but by unlocking the secrets held within the physical confines of their last known location, using the most sophisticated tools available to decipher a decades-old enigma. The precise nature of the stateroom's preservation, untouched for decades, presents a unique challenge in interpreting the forensic evidence it contains. Unlike a typical crime scene, which is often subjected to immediate, albeit sometimes imperfect processing, this room has experienced a different kind of temporal degradation. The absence of human intervention means that natural processes, dust accumulation, potential minor shifts in atmospheric moisture, and the slow decay of organic materials have continued uninterrupted. Consequently, any analysis must account for this passive environmental evolution. For instance, while advanced techniques can detect trace DNA, the interpretation of its location and condition requires an understanding of how it would have naturally settled or degraded over 30 years in a sealed environment. The original state of the room prior to its isolation is a crucial yet unknown variable. Now consider how this applies when the evidence itself has been subject to prolonged, undisturbed natural processes. Investigators must differentiate between traces indicative of the Petersons' presence and those resulting from the room's subsequent passive existence. This necessitates a multidisciplinary approach, integrating forensic science with environmental monitoring and historical atmospheric data if available, to establish a baseline understanding of the room's post-event condition. Furthermore, the psychological effect of entering such a preserved space for the first time is significant. The palpable sense of stepping back in time, of encountering a scene frozen at a pivotal moment, can influence perception and interpretation. It's a stark reminder of the passage of time and the enduring power of unresolved events. The very act of sealing the stateroom, whether intentional or accidental, raises questions about the motive behind its isolation. If it was a deliberate act, who performed it, and for what purpose? Was it to conceal evidence, protect a secret, or perhaps to create a memorial of sorts? Conversely, if it was an oversight, a failure in the initial search protocols, it speaks to the immense pressure and chaos that likely surrounded the disappearance. Now, consider how this applies when the preservation itself is as enigmatic as the disappearance. The lack of any systematic record of the room's isolation or the rationale behind it leaves a significant gap in the investigative narrative. This ambiguity means that any findings within the room must be contextualized against the backdrop of this unknown preservation process. For example, if trace evidence is found, its interpretation is complicated by the uncertainty of whether it was disturbed by the Petersons, by the unknown individual who sealed the room, or by the natural settling of particles over time. The room's integrity, while a boon for forensic potential, also serves as a barrier to understanding the immediate aftermath of the Petersons' vanishing, forcing investigators to infer actions and motives from a static scene. The technological advancements that now allow for the analysis of microscopic anomalies are particularly relevant to a preserved environment like the Petersons' stateroom. Techniques such as advanced microscopy, including scanning electron microscopy, SEM, can reveal intricate details on surfaces that are invisible to the naked eye. This could include microscopic tool marks on the door mechanism, unusual fiber fragments embedded in carpets, or even residual prints that were too faint or degraded to be detected in 1990. Now consider how this applies when you can examine evidence at a vastly increased level of detail. Furthermore, The development of specialized chemical reagents and spectroscopic analysis methods can identify the composition of minute substances, potentially revealing the presence of materials or compounds that were not part of the ship's standard inventory or the Petersons' belongings. This could include residues from specialized tools, chemical agents used for incapacitation, or even unique environmental contaminants. The ability to perform isotopic analysis on trace materials, for instance, might offer insights into their origin, distinguishing between materials common to the ship, the Alaskan environment, or something entirely external. The psychological implications of a perfectly preserved yet empty stateroom extend beyond the immediate forensic findings. Such a space can evoke a profound sense of unease, a feeling of being in the presence of an unresolved event that has been frozen in time. This can influence the investigators themselves, creating a heightened sense of anticipation and pressure to uncover the truth. Now consider how this applies when the environment itself seems to hold a palpable sense of history and mystery. The meticulous reconstruction of events, based on the evidence found within the room, becomes a narrative endeavor, attempting to weave a coherent story from fragmented clues. The very stillness of the stateroom, a testament to its isolation, paradoxically amplifies the imagined dynamism of what might have transpired within its confines. This creates a unique challenge for investigators who must remain objective and analytical while navigating the potent psychological resonance of such a deeply unsettling environment. The meticulous preservation of the Petersons' stateroom, while offering an unparalleled forensic opportunity, also presents a unique challenge in reconstructing the timeline of the disappearance. The absence of any signs of immediate post-event disturbance means that the chronological sequence of actions, if any occurred within the room after the Petersons themselves vanished, is entirely inferred. Now consider how this applies when the very sequence of events is a blank slate, waiting for interpretation. For instance, if the room was indeed sealed by a third party, the method of entry and egress, and the time taken to accomplish this, remains speculative. Was the sealing a hasty act, performed under duress, or a deliberate, time-consuming process designed for maximum concealment? Forensic traces, such as latent fingerprints or microscopic fibers, might offer clues, but their temporal relationship to the Petersons' presence is the crucial missing piece of information. Furthermore, the ship's logbooks, even if meticulously maintained, would only record the vessel's movements and operational status, not the specific events within a particular stateroom, unless an incident was officially reported. Consequently, the timeline of the disappearance must be constructed solely from the static evidence within the room, a process akin to assembling a jigsaw puzzle where most of the pieces are missing, and the few that remain offer only partial glimpses of the complete picture. Another crucial layer to consider is the potential for subtle, non-obvious modifications to the stateroom structure or contents that might have facilitated the disappearance without leaving overt signs of tampering. This could involve the manipulation of ventilation grills, the removal or repositioning of minor fixtures, or even the exploitation of a previously unknown access panel or maintenance hatch. The ship's original architectural blueprints, if accessible and interpretable, become vital documents in this phase of the investigation, allowing forensic engineers to cross-reference the current state of the stateroom with its intended design. Now consider how this applies when the very architecture of the space might hold the key. For example, a seemingly innocuous seam along a wall panel might, under detailed examination with specialized imaging techniques, reveal evidence of recent manipulation or a hidden cavity. Similarly, the undisturbed nature of the plumbing or electrical systems might be misleading if a subtle, temporary bypass or alteration was implemented. The challenge lies in identifying modifications that are so expertly executed as to appear entirely incidental or original to the ship's construction. a testament to a level of planning and skill that elevates the mystery beyond a simple accident or spontaneous act. The psychological profile of an individual capable of orchestrating such a meticulously concealed disappearance, leaving behind a perfectly sealed room, is a complex area of inquiry. Such an act suggests a high degree of premeditation, meticulous planning, and a profound understanding of the ship's environment and security measures. Now consider how this applies when you are trying to understand the mindset of someone who could achieve such a feat. This individual would likely possess exceptional composure, the ability to operate under extreme pressure, and potentially a sophisticated knowledge of forensic countermeasures designed to prevent detection. The absence of any struggle within the room further suggests a method that was either non-violent or so swift and incapacitating that it left no visible trace. This could point towards individuals with expertise in areas such as stealth, incapacitation techniques, or even psychological manipulation rather than brute force. The motive behind such an act, whether personal, criminal, or perhaps even ideological, remains a critical yet elusive component of the investigation, as it would heavily influence the perpetrator's actions and the methods employed. The interpretation of forensic findings within the preserved stateroom must also contend with the possibility of intentional misdirection or the creation of a false narrative. The very perfection of the scene, the undisturbed belongings, the locked door, could be a deliberate tableau designed to mislead investigators and obscure the true sequence of events. Now, consider how this applies when the evidence itself might be a carefully constructed illusion. For instance, if trace evidence suggests the presence of a third party, the placement of that evidence might have been carefully orchestrated to point towards a specific, albeit incorrect, conclusion. Similarly, the sealing of the door could be a theatrical element intended to create the impression of an impossible vanishing act, thereby diverting attention from a more conventional, albeit still clandestine, exit. The investigators must therefore approach the evidence with a critical eye, constantly questioning not only what is present, but also what might be conspicuously absent, and whether the scene has been artfully arranged to conceal a simpler, yet equally significant truth. The profound implications of forensic linguistics, a discipline that analyzes language in legal contexts, could offer a unique avenue in deciphering the Peterson case, particularly if any written or recorded communication, however fragmented, were to be discovered within the preserved stateroom. This field examines not just the content of language, but also the style, grammar, spelling, punctuation, and even the unique idiolect, the individual's distinctive way of speaking or writing that can serve as a linguistic fingerprint. Now, consider how this applies when you're looking for the unique voice of an individual within an otherwise silent space. Even a hastily scribbled note, a personal journal entry, or an audio recording, if present, could be subjected to linguistic analysis to ascertain authorship, identify potential psychological states, or detect linguistic anomalies that might distinguish between the couple themselves or an unknown party. For example, consistent use of specific vocabulary, grammatical structures, or even idiosyncratic spelling errors can be highly indicative of a particular writer. Furthermore, the analysis of discourse patterns, how ideas are connected, how arguments are structured, or the prevalence of certain rhetorical devices can reveal insights into the writer's cognitive processes and communicative intentions. This could be crucial in distinguishing between a genuine personal reflection and a deliberately crafted message intended to mislead. Building on this, the field of forensic psychology could provide invaluable insights into the potential motivations and behavioral patterns of individuals involved, should any evidence suggest a third party's involvement or a psychological crisis for John or Sarah. This discipline explores the mental state of individuals, examining factors such as personality traits, potential mental health conditions, relationship dynamics, and the influence of external stresses. Now consider how this applies when you are trying to understand the why behind an inexplicable action. A forensic psychologist might analyze the context of the disappearance, the known background of the Petersons, and any discovered communications or behavioral indicators to develop a profile of potential perpetrators, or to understand the psychological underpinnings of a voluntary disappearance, however improbable it may seem. This could involve assessing the likelihood of certain types of stressors leading to extreme actions, the dynamics of interpersonal relationships that might escalate to such a point, or the characteristics of individuals who might possess the calculated cunning required for such a meticulously executed vanishing. The goal would be to move beyond mere speculation and establish a scientifically grounded understanding of the psychological landscape surrounding the event. Furthermore, the application of advanced digital forensics, even if seemingly anachronistic for 1990, might still yield surprising results if any electronic devices, however primitive by today's standards, were present in the stateroom. While personal computers were not commonplace in staterooms then, portable audio recorders, early digital cameras, or even sophisticated electronic organizers might have existed. Now consider how this applies when you are searching for digital ghosts in a pre-digital age. The recovery and analysis of data from such devices, even if fragmented or corrupted, could provide critical information about the Petersons' activities, communications, or even their state of mind leading up to their disappearance. This might involve recovering deleted files, analyzing metadata associated with stored information, or attempting to reconstruct corrupted data streams. The challenge here lies in the rudimentary nature of the technology, requiring specialized tools and expertise to extract meaningful information from devices that were at the forefront of technology in their time but are now considered archaic. Conversely, the field of maritime archaeology could offer a unique perspective if any artifacts or debris related to the Petersons were ever recovered from the waters surrounding the ship's route. This discipline applies archaeological principles to underwater environments, focusing on the recovery, preservation, and interpretation of submerged cultural heritage. Now consider how this applies when you are looking for clues lost to the depths of the ocean. Even seemingly insignificant items, a piece of clothing, a personal belonging, or debris from the ship itself, could, if recovered and analyzed by maritime archaeologists, provide crucial context. The condition of the artifact, its location of recovery, and its material composition could offer clues about the circumstances under which it entered the water, potentially corroborating or contradicting existing theories about the disappearance. The meticulous documentation and conservation of such items are paramount as they represent tangible links to the past, offering insights that written records or witness testimonies alone cannot provide. Another crucial layer in understanding the potential complexities of the stateroom's preservation involves the concept of forensic ecology, which examines the role of environmental factors and biological evidence in criminal investigations. While typically applied to outdoor scenes, its principles can be adapted to the unique microenvironment of a sealed stateroom. Now consider how this applies when you are analyzing the ecosystem of a contained space. This could involve analyzing the types of mold or fungi present, the presence of insect larvae or exoskeletons, or even the distribution of dust particles and their composition. These biological indicators, when analyzed by forensic ecologists, can provide information about the time elapsed since the room was sealed, the prevailing environmental conditions within the room, and potentially even the presence of external elements that might have been introduced. The undisturbed nature of the stateroom offers a unique opportunity to study these ecological markers in a way that is rarely possible in more conventional investigative settings. The concept of trace evidence analysis within the context of this preserved stateroom takes on an even greater significance, moving beyond traditional forensic applications. This involves the examination of microscopic materials transferred between individuals or between an individual and their environment. Now consider how this applies when you're looking for the faintest whispers of interaction. In a sealed room, such trace evidence, fibers from clothing, hair strands, soil particles, or even microscopic fragments of glass or paint, would remain undisturbed, preserving a detailed record of who was present and what they were doing. The challenge lies in identifying and interpreting these minute clues, which require highly specialized equipment and expertise. For example, the unique chemical composition of a fiber or the microscopic striations on a hair shaft can be used to link individuals to specific locations or objects, potentially providing definitive answers in cases where overt evidence is lacking. The preserved nature of the stateroom allows for a more comprehensive and less degraded collection of such invaluable trace evidence. The concept of forensic seismology, though typically associated with the detection of underground explosions or seismic activity, can be conceptually adapted to analyze subtle structural disturbances within a vessel like the Northern Star. While the ship itself is not subject to geological tremors, its hull and internal structures are constantly under stress from wave action, engine vibrations, and the sheer movement of thousands of passengers. Now consider how this applies when you're looking for residual structural anomalies. Any significant non-standard event within a stateroom, such as a forceful entry or a struggle that involved significant physical impact against the walls or floor, might have left minute residual stress patterns or microfractures within the ship's superstructure. Advanced acoustic monitoring or highly sensitive vibration analysis, if applied retrospectively to the ship's structural data or if the stateroom's integrity could be precisely mapped, might reveal subtle deviations from expected stress patterns. These anomalies, even if imperceptible to the human senses, could indicate points of unusual force application or structural compromise. Furthermore, the application of digital archaeology to any recovered electronic devices, however rudimentary, offers a unique lens through which to examine the Peterson's final days. This involves not just data recovery, but the contextual analysis of that data within its original technological framework. Now, consider how this applies when you are sifting through the digital detritus of a bygone era. For instance, if an early digital audio recorder were found, its internal clock and the degradation patterns of its recording media could provide a more precise timeline of its usage. Analyzing the metadata associated with any stored files, even if seemingly innocuous, might reveal hidden timestamps or system interactions that were not immediately apparent. The challenge lies in understanding the limitations and quirks of the technology itself, recognizing that data recovery in this context is not a simple plug-and-play operation, but requires a deep understanding of obsolete file systems and data storage methodologies. The field of wear pattern analysis, typically applied to footwear or tool marks, can be conceptually extended to analyze the wear and tear on the stateroom's furnishings and fixtures. Now consider how this applies when you are examining the subtle signs of human interaction with inanimate objects. Even in a seemingly undisturbed room, minute changes in the texture or sheen of a carpet near a specific area, or subtle abrasions on a door handle or desk surface, could indicate patterns of use or movement that are not immediately obvious. The meticulous examination of these wear patterns, by comparing them against known benchmarks or by analyzing their progression over time, could reveal anomalies that suggest unusual activity or frequent interaction with particular parts of the room. This might include the specific way a door was habitually opened, the path taken repeatedly across the floor, or the repeated contact with a particular piece of furniture. Moreover, the concept of forensic entomology, which studies insects and other arthropods in relation to criminal investigations, can be applied even in a seemingly sterile environment like a stateroom, especially if it remained sealed for a significant period. Now, consider how this applies when you are looking for the smallest biological indicators of time and presence. Even in a sealed environment, the introduction of insects or their eggs, perhaps carried in on clothing or luggage, could occur. The presence, type, and developmental stage of any insect remains found within the stateroom could provide valuable chronological data, helping to establish a more precise timeline for when the room was sealed relative to the Petersons' disappearance. This might involve the identification of specific species known to thrive in certain conditions, or the analysis of insect life cycles to estimate the duration of the room's isolation. Conversely, the application of forensic fluid analysis to any residual bodily fluids, however minute, could offer critical insights that were unattainable in 1990. Modern techniques can now detect and analyze incredibly small quantities of blood, saliva, or semen, even if they are no longer visible to the naked eye. Now consider how this applies when you are looking for the invisible traces of human presence. The chemical composition of these fluids, their DNA profile, and even their hormonal content could provide definitive evidence of who was present in the stateroom, their biological relationship to each other, and potentially even their physiological state at the time of the event. The undisturbed nature of the stateroom would be paramount in ensuring the integrity of such delicate biological evidence, allowing for a more accurate and conclusive analysis. The meticulous preservation of the Petersons' stateroom, while offering an unparalleled forensic opportunity, also presents a unique challenge in reconstructing the timeline of the disappearance. The absence of any signs of immediate post-event disturbance means that the chronological sequence of actions, if any occurred within the room after the Petersons themselves vanished, is entirely inferred. Now consider how this applies when the very sequence of events is a blank slate, waiting for interpretation. For instance, if the room was indeed sealed by a third party, the method of entry and egress, and the time taken to accomplish this, remains speculative. Was the sealing a hasty act, performed under duress, or a deliberate time-consuming process designed for maximum concealment? Forensic traces, such as latent fingerprints or microscopic fibers, might offer clues, but their temporal relationship to the Petersons' presence is the crucial, missing piece of information. Furthermore, the ship's logbooks, even if meticulously maintained, would only record the vessel's movements and operational status, not the specific events within a particular stateroom, unless an incident was officially reported. Consequently, the timeline of the disappearance must be constructed solely from the static evidence within the room, a process akin to assembling a jigsaw puzzle where most of the pieces are missing and the few that remain offer only partial glimpses of the complete picture. Building on this, the field of forensic psychology could provide invaluable insights into the potential motivations and behavioral patterns of individuals involved, should any evidence suggest a third party's involvement or a psychological crisis for John or Sarah. This discipline explores the mental state of individuals, examining factors such as personality traits, potential mental health conditions, relationship dynamics, and the influence of external stressors. Now consider how this applies when you are trying to understand the why behind an inexplicable action. A forensic psychologist might analyze the context of the disappearance, the known background of the Petersons, and any discovered communications or behavioral indicators to develop a profile of potential perpetrators. or to understand the psychological underpinnings of a voluntary disappearance, however improbable it may seem. This could involve assessing the likelihood of certain types of stressors leading to extreme actions, the dynamics of interpersonal relationships that might escalate to such a point, or the characteristics of individuals who might possess the calculated cunning required for such a meticulously executed vanishing. Conversely, the application of forensic fluid analysis to any residual bodily fluids, however minute, could offer critical insights that were unattainable in 1990. Modern techniques can now detect and analyze incredibly small quantities of blood, saliva, or semen, even if they are no longer visible to the naked eye. Now, consider how this applies when you are looking for the invisible traces of human presence. The chemical composition of these fluids, their DNA profile, and even their hormonal content could provide definitive evidence of who was present in the stateroom, their biological relationship to each other, and potentially even their physiological state at the time of the event. The undisturbed nature of the stateroom would be paramount in ensuring the integrity of such delicate biological evidence, allowing for a more accurate and conclusive analysis. Moreover, the concept of forensic entomology, which studies insects and other arthropods in relation to criminal investigations, can be applied even in a seemingly sterile environment like a stateroom, especially if it remained sealed for a significant period. Now consider how this applies when you are looking for the smallest biological indicators of time and presence. Even in a sealed environment, the introduction of insects or their eggs, perhaps carried in on clothing or luggage, could occur. The presence, type, and developmental stage of any insect remains found within the stateroom could provide valuable chronological data, helping to establish a more precise timeline for when the room was sealed relative to the Petersons' disappearance. This might involve the identification of specific species known to thrive in certain conditions, or the analysis of insect life cycles to estimate the duration of the room's isolation. Another crucial layer to consider is the potential for subtle, non-obvious modifications to the stateroom's structure or contents that might have facilitated the disappearance without leaving overt signs of tampering. This could involve the manipulation of ventilation grills, the removal or repositioning of minor fixtures, or even the exploitation of a previously unknown access panel or maintenance hatch. The ship's original architectural blueprints, if accessible and interpretable, become vital documents in this phase of the investigation, allowing forensic engineers to cross-reference the current state of the stateroom with its intended design. Now consider how this applies when the very architecture of the space might hold the key. For example, a seemingly innocuous seam along a wall panel might, under detailed examination with specialized imaging techniques, reveal evidence of recent manipulation or a hidden cavity. Similarly, the undisturbed nature of the plumbing or electrical systems might be misleading if a subtle, temporary bypass or alteration was implemented. The challenge lies in identifying modifications that are so expertly executed as to appear entirely incidental or original to the ship's construction, a testament to a level of planning and skill that elevates the mystery beyond a simple accident or spontaneous act. The psychological implications of a perfectly preserved yet empty stateroom extend beyond the immediate forensic findings. Such a space can evoke a profound sense of unease, a feeling of being in the presence of an unresolved event that has been frozen in time. This can influence the investigators themselves, creating a heightened sense of anticipation and pressure to uncover the truth. Now consider how this applies when the environment itself seems to hold a palpable sense of history and mystery. The meticulous reconstruction of events, based on the evidence found within the room, becomes a narrative endeavor, attempting to weave a coherent story from fragmented clues. The very stillness of the stateroom, a testament to its isolation, paradoxically amplifies the imagined dynamism of what might have transpired within its confines. This creates a unique challenge for investigators who must remain objective and analytical while navigating the potent psychological resonance of such a deeply unsettling environment. Reflecting on this journey so far, we've navigated the intricate currents of an enduring enigma, tracing its origins from the icy waters of Alaska to the meticulously preserved confines of a stateroom that has defied the relentless march of time. The fragmented echoes of that fateful summer in 1990 have resonated through decades, each unanswered question layering itself upon the last, forming a complex tapestry of speculation and scientific inquiry. As we stand on the precipice of our final contemplation, it becomes clear that the true narrative is not merely about a vanishing, but about the very human endeavor to comprehend the incomprehensible, to impose order upon the chaotic void left by absence. The myriad investigative threads, from the limitations of early forensic science to the potential of cutting-edge analysis, have converged not on a singular definitive answer, but on a richer understanding of the questions themselves. The convergence of these explored ideas paints a picture not of a simple mystery, but of a multifaceted phenomenon that probes the very boundaries of our knowledge and perception. The initial search, constrained by the technologies and methodologies of its time, laid the groundwork for a puzzle that would only deepen with the passage of years. The subsequent decades, marked by the persistent search for closure by families and investigators alike, have underscored the profound impact of the unexplained on the human psyche. As we pivot towards the final reflection, consider how the technological advancements we've touched upon act as a sophisticated lens, refining our view of a scene that has remained remarkably static, yet which has yielded increasingly nuanced interpretations with each passing year. This journey has been akin to piecing together an intricate mosaic where each examined facet, from the geological immensity of the Alaskan landscape to the microscopic details within a sealed room, contributes to a larger, more complex image. The cumulative effect of these insights leaves us with a profound appreciation for the enduring power of the unknown and the persistent human drive to seek understanding, even when confronted by the seemingly insurmountable. The very nature of the evidence, preserved against the ravages of time, invites a re-examination of how we approach the inexplicable. It highlights the dynamic interplay between the passage of time and the evolution of our investigative capabilities, suggesting that what was once an unsolvable riddle may, with new perspectives and tools, begin to reveal its deeper truths. As we move towards our concluding thoughts, the path forward is illuminated not by the promise of a singular, dramatic revelation, but by the quiet strength of persistent inquiry and the evolving nature of truth itself. The Alaskan wilderness, a canvas of breathtaking beauty and profound mystery, served as the silent witness to a disappearance that defied logic and time. John and Sarah Peterson, adrift in the nascent glow of their honeymoon, vanished from a sealed stateroom, leaving behind a riddle etched into the very fabric of memory. This journey, from the initial frantic search to the startling discovery of their undisturbed sanctuary decades later, has been a testament to the persistent human spirit's quest for answers. We've traversed the evolving landscape of forensic science, witnessing how yesterday's limitations become today's fertile ground for discovery, and how the seemingly impossible can, with time and ingenuity, yield to rigorous inquiry. The preserved stateroom, a time capsule of unanswered questions, has become more than just a crime scene. It is a potent symbol of life's inherent enigmas and our unwavering drive to unravel them. Our exploration has revealed that the true essence of the Peterson mystery lies not solely in the how or why of their vanishing, but in what such an enduring enigma teaches us about ourselves. It highlights our innate need for narrative coherence, our struggle to reconcile the rationale with the inexplicable and the profound psychological impact of unresolved loss. The advancements in fields ranging from trace evidence analysis to forensic psychology have offered new lenses through which to view this frozen moment in time, suggesting that while the immediate circumstances remain shrouded, the potential for understanding continues to evolve. This enduring puzzle serves as a powerful reminder that the pursuit of truth is an ongoing process, one that demands patience, innovation, and a deep respect for the complexities of human experience and the vastness of the unknown. The true practice begins now, not with the expectation of a singular, definitive revelation, but with the embrace of the journey itself. The Petersons' story, now imbued with the insights gleaned from decades of scientific progress and persistent human curiosity, transcends the confines of a single incident. It becomes a broader reflection on the nature of mystery, the resilience of memory, and the continuous unfolding of knowledge. The lessons learned from this meticulously preserved enigma encourage us to approach the unexplained not with resignation, but with a renewed sense of purpose. It is in this ongoing pursuit, this dedication to understanding the subtle whispers of the past and the evolving language of evidence, that we find not just potential answers, but a deeper appreciation for the intricate tapestry of existence itself.